B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comment. It's Monday, October 14th, 2019. I feel like I need to get some new specially tinted glasses to read the massive amounts of yellow journalism being produced in the country these days. Mostly it relates to the war in Syria and America's sudden concern for the Kurds. But I want to lead with a story that really bothered me, published in Sunday's New York Times. They smeared Democratic presidential candidate Tulsi Gabbard about a dozen different ways. And, as you know, I am intrigued by Congresswoman Gabbard's military service that feeds her call for an end to regime change wars. And I believe that the American people deserve to hear more from the Congresswoman. She will be appearing in the debate broadcast from Ohio tomorrow evening on CNN and at the New York Times website. But in preparation, the smear that the Times published under the byline of Lisa Lehrer in Sunday's print edition actually shocked me. The headline reads, "Left scratches its head and far-right swoons at Gabbard campaign." They open with quotes from right-wingers like Richard Spencer, Steve Bannon, Ron Paul, Mike Cernovich. And by asking a lot of leading and rhetorical questions, by selective quotation of people who don't understand or don't want to understand the appeal of Tulsi Gabbard, they create an image, a perception, that she is weird, that she is dangerous, and that Democrats can't trust her because she has appeal to some Republicans. They also smear her because she has appeared on RT, the Kremlin-backed news agency, and that they frequently mention Ms. Gabbard, which surprises the voice of the New York Times because she is not polling that well. But they don't bother to note that Tulsi Gabbard is not welcome on MSNBC. She does not advance their military-industrial media complex war agenda. And because she's hard to categorize, and I struggle with it too. I have questions about her background, her Hindu upbringing, her involvement with this weird guru named Chris Butler. But I don't think that it is any more disqualifying than Bernie Sanders' alleged atheism, and I don't even know what religious practice or views Elizabeth Warren has. But we've heard plenty about Tulsi. Here's a quote. "On podcasts and online videos, in interviews and Twitter feeds, alt-right internet stars, white nationalists, libertarian activists, and some of the biggest boosters of Trump heap praise on Ms. Gabbard. They like the Hawaiian Congresswoman's isolationist foreign policy views. They like her support for drug decriminalization. They like what she sees as censorship by big technology platforms." Now, this misrepresents most of the characterizations that they made in one sweeping paragraph there. Then they tie her to 4chan, where people call her mommy because of her willingness to criticize Israel. And all of these show the gatekeeper function that the New York Times assigns to itself, to identify these dangerous fringe characters and alert the populace with this one-sided reporting. Now, I fault Gabbard for refusing requests for comment for the article. She should be right in there fighting. The smear goes on, yet there's only confusion for several Democratic officials, activists, and party officials who privately say they've been a little spooked by Ms. Gabbard. Rival campaigns worry about her unpredictable attacks, like the way she went after Senator Kamala Harris, who deserved it. And then they bring us the Hillary Clinton voice of Neera Tanden, Center for American Progress. She's taken a series of policy steps which signal to the right that she has deep areas of alignment. Never do they question how the Democratic Party has become the new roost for neocons, for endless regime change wars. And we'll get to the spin and the dangerous yellow journalism that we're seeing on the U.S. retreat from Syria next. They also link Tulsi Gabbard without any evidence to Russian bots. They raise questions without offering any proof or backup that she is being aided by Russia. I can't imagine that they even know who she is in Russia. And, of course, they have to repeat that she has support from Narendra Modi of India. I'm uncomfortable with that. But then they have to smear her because she met with the Egyptian dictator who we back, el-Sisi, and that she also met with Bashar al-Assad, as everybody knows. And these are indications that she's a defective American. And I deeply resent this kind of coverage. As I've said, I am not, I'm not endorsing Tulsi Gabbard. I support her as a primary candidate whose voice deserves to be heard and whose views should be shared with the American people and not in that kind of a hit job. A couple of other media stories front and center today. NBC News is now reduced to calling Ronan Farrow names. His new book alleges that the network tried to conceal complaints about Matt Lauer and his sexual adventures and obstruct Farrow's reporting into the Harvey Weinstein case. And so they trot out NBC News President Noah Oppenheim. We have no secrets, nothing to hide. Farrow's effort to defame NBC News is clearly motivated not by a pursuit of truth, but an axe to grind. And this is the news outlet that's been a major promoter of the Russiagate telenovela with Rachel Maddow leading the charge. And I think Ronan Farrow, for whatever motivation he has because of Woody Allen and his mom, Woody's treatment of his sister, it's fair to say that he is obsessed with sexual crimes. But I haven't seen anything in his reporting that has been shown to be false. And as NBC is reduced to calling him names, claiming that he's promoting conspiracy theories, calling it a smear of NBC, well, you can decide who you believe. But I believe Ronan Farrow in this case. You may have heard that there is this deep fake video that somebody created which shows Trump stabbing, shooting, and brutally assaulting members of the news media and attacking logos of news outlets. And apparently was shown at the Trump National Doral in Miami over the weekend. But the efforts to link it to one of the Trump family members, I guess Donnie Jr. was there, but he says he didn't see it. And I can't imagine just because it was shown on the property that he knows everything that's going on there. But the most violent clip shows Trump's head superimposed on the body of a man opening fire inside the Church of Fake News on parishioners who've had the faces of his critics or logos of media organizations superimposed. It appears to be an edited scene of a church massacre from the 2014 dark comedy film called Kingsman: The Secret Service. Well, I guess it's somebody's idea of clever and sinister and funny all at the same time. But it is sick. And it is an expression and an extension and a projection of all of the memes that Trump has been throwing out there. And before I jump to Syria, I want to just offer some positive words and a shout out to Nancy Amons. I'd never heard of her before. She is a reporter at a TV station, the NBC affiliate in Nashville, WSMV. She got a big interview with Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. And she didn't just toss him softballs or ask a question and when he dodged it, move on. She pressed him 3 different times to talk about the testimony of the former U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, Marie Yovanovitch, who spoke to a House committee behind closed doors on Friday. And Pompeo, who is really good at not answering the question, proceeded to not answer the questions repeatedly, but that didn't stop Ammons from pressing. And she said politely, she said, I didn't feel unsafe because he was irritated, but I think he liked me less at the end than at the beginning of the interview. I relate to that. I've had many episodes just like that. First, as we dive into Syria, there is some news. Over the weekend, a deal appears to have been struck between the Assad government and the leader of the Kurdish fighters that we call the Syrian Democratic Forces. And this is something that we reported early on from Haaretz in Israel after Trump made the impulsive decision to order the retreat of the United States from Syria. Now, over the weekend, there is a reliable report that some of the fighters aligned with Turkey took some Kurdish prisoners and killed them in cold blood. That appears to be the first potential war crime from this current episode. And also, over the weekend, I do credit the New York Times before I get ready to really give them shit, is in the Sunday paper. They published a lengthy investigative piece examining 4 airstrikes that occurred in Syria on the 5th of May this year. In a 12-hour period, they show how Russian fighter jets bombed 4 different hospitals in different locations. And they give us rich detail. They translated the intercepted pilot to command center communications. And the pilots repeatedly confirmed the attacks in the proximity of the hospitals and medical facilities that were attacked. Now, this is one of the gruesome parts of the Syrian war. The Assad forces have been repeatedly attacking even makeshift hospitals, even hospitals that were in underground bunkers. That is a serious war crime, and I find it deeply deplorable. Along with the alleged execution of these Kurdish prisoners, I have no tolerance for that. European Union's foreign ministers, all 28 of them, have agreed to stop selling arms to Turkey. How about Saudi Arabia? Can you put them on the same do not kill list? And speaking of the Saudis, this is where we begin the coverage of the spin on Trump's decision to pull out U.S. troops. Saudi Arabia has spoken out publicly about the abrupt decision to pull American forces out of northern Syria. One top diplomat called it a disaster for the region. But the next question was, how do you feel about the 1,800 troops that Trump is sending to Saudi Arabia? And so his actions are really sending mixed messages. There's no question about that. And I don't defend the way he makes these decisions and implements them. But fundamentally, the media is ganging up on Trump with help from Democrats and Republicans. We're all hawks now, right? Both parties. And they want to shame Trump into reversing his decision. Headline in the New York Times, abandoned by U.S. in Syria. Kurds find new ally in American foe. That's the agreement with the Assad government. And I believed it was inevitable that the Kurds, who are, like many of these fighting groups, whether you call them rebels, militias, they're flexible. And when they hit a dead end, they blast out in another direction. So again, the language of the times, Kurdish forces long allied with the U.S. announced a new deal with the government in Damascus, a sworn enemy of Washington that is backed by Russia. Well, they're accepting that the irrational mission that Obama outlined, where we were going to fight the Islamic State and try to take down the Assad government all at the same damn time, It's unachievable. It never was. And in all of the articles that I have read today about Syria, all of which demonize Trump for making the decision to pull out, not one of them notes the minuscule number of troops that are involved. 150 in that northwest corner of Syria, where Turkey is now operating militarily. A total of 1,000 troops in the whole country. And they act as if they were there, individually, making peace stick. Here's another article from the New York Times. Pullback leaves Green Berets feeling ashamed and Kurdish allies describing betrayal. It is the same spin. They trusted us and we broke that trust, an Army officer said. It's a stain on the American conscience. The war in Syria, from the American point of view, has been unconscionable. And now, because it's politically convenient, because it promotes the military-industrial complex agenda, do we all have to fall in line and say, oh, yeah, Trump shouldn't have pulled those troops out of Syria? Well, I, for one, won't do that. And here's this selective alarm. Get this. Syria is advancing in Syria. Now, as a result of the agreement with the Kurdish fighters, the Syrian government, for the first time in years, has taken over Tabqa, which is on the outskirts of Raqqa, and another nearby town. This is now the voice of the Washington Post. The dramatic Syrian advance was set in motion by Trump's sudden decision in recent days to withdraw U.S. troops from northeastern Syria. Oh, it's northeast. I got that wrong. I said northwest a minute ago. Leaving the Kurdish forces, long allied with the U.S., vulnerable to attack from the Turkish military. Turkey had long demanded that the U.S. expel the Kurdish fighters from Manbij and complained that a deal struck with Washington to remove the fighters was not being implemented. And that goes back to last December. So this is seen as impulsive on Trump's part. But he sent a clear signal. It's what, Jim Mattis resigned over as Secretary of Defense. But now the pile-on continues. Here is now David Sanger writing an analytical piece in the New York Times. Trump followed his gut on Syria. Calamity came fast. Opening paragraph. President Trump's acquiescence to Turkey's move to send troops deep into Syria territory has in 1 week's time turned into a bloody carnage, forced the abandonment of a successful 5-year-long American project to keep the peace on a volatile border. What bullshit is that? All right, I'll quote some more. And given an unanticipated victory to 4 American adversaries, Russia, Iran, the Syrian government, and the Islamic State. He continues, Trump ignored months of warnings from his advisors about what calamities would likely ensue if he followed his instincts to pull back from Syria and abandon America's longtime allies, the Kurds. All right, then we go to the hip and happening BuzzFeed. Their headline is loaded with spin. Kurdish forces previously allied with the U.S. have turned to Russian-backed Syria for help. As if we didn't know Russia is backing Syria. They have to put that in place for people who will never read the article, but need that hit of Russia is scary, Russia is bad. The BuzzFeed article reads, Kurdish forces that were until last week allied with the U.S. have reached a deal for assistance with the government of Assad, which is backed by Russia, because you didn't know that. Syrian regime troops are now moving to the Turkish-Syrian border as Kurdish-led forces come under assault by Turkey's armed forces and their proxies. Now to the Washington Post. First, a news article under the byline of Ishan Tharoor. Trump's retreat in Syria turns into a mess. Now, in the space of just a few days, his administration is already reaping what it sowed, plunged the region into chaos. It's been in chaos for 8 years. The order to remove troops came Saturday toward the end of a chaotic day in which the viability of the U.S. mission in Syria rapidly unraveled after Turkish troops and their Syrian rebel proxies advanced deep into Syrian territory and cut U.S. supply lines. Now, that is an unattributed quote to my colleagues. I mean, it is remarkable This is not objective or unbiased reporting. It has a clear agenda, and in the Washington Post editorial, it's even more blunt. Trump's blunder in Syria is irreparable. Until now, it was possible to hope that the damage caused by Trump's terrible, incompetent ignorance and impulsivity in foreign policy was largely theoretical and possibly reparable. That is no longer true. The cost of his latest Syria blunder is unfolding before our eyes. Innocent lives lost, U.S. servicemen and women betrayed, butchering dictators emboldened, dangerous terrorists set free. A ghastly scene is playing out, and it almost surely will get worse. Never mentioning that our capacity and our will to do something about this is almost nil. Now, the only rational thinking that I found today on this was from Simon Jenkins, an opinion writer at The Guardian. Donald Trump is right to extricate the U.S. from Syria. American troops have no strategic reason to be in that country. If they stayed any longer, they would only be sucked in deeper. If they tried to impose a sort of peace, they would be attacked by all sides. The outside world has no dog in the Turkish-Kurd fight. And let me say that I support the aspirations of the Kurdish people in Syria, in Iraq, in Iran, and in Turkey. And I know I'm not going to get my way on this. There will be no Kurdistan or other area where the Kurds can live in, a separate place of their own. And I don't think that's a good thing. But obviously people aren't listening to my advice on this. And Mr. Jenkins continues, while Trump's motives or thought process for the latest move aren't exactly clear as ever, that he has engaged conservative and liberal interventionists alike is as reassuring as it is alarming. Belligerent meddling is now embedded in the West's worldview. But just as there is rarely a good time to intervene at other people's troubles, so there is rarely a good time to stop. Were there a way in which a U.S. Army could swiftly bring peace and concord to northern Syria, it might be different. There is none. Nothing in the modern history of the Middle East, not the Taliban or Saddam or Assad, has equaled the horror unleashed by America's wars of 9/11. They have come to seem as interminable as they are unspeakable. As in any intervention, narratives evolve, alliances are formed. Most foolish was the encouragement and aid offered since 2015 to rebels in the civil war in Syria fighting against Assad. Obama and Trump came to office firmly in favor of withdrawing from the region, but the U.S. military-industrial complex proved too powerful for them. Trump has been particularly emphatic about this, but his unpredictability and aggressive rhetoric has muddied his intentions. He has played hard and soft with Iran, tried to leave Afghanistan but not dared to do so, and now leaves the Kurds in the lurch. Makes a lot of sense to me. Every day I pause for a moment to thank the people who support my work here at the Peter B. Collins Podcast with your subscriptions. Great people like Theodore Kelly, Cliff Johnson, Jim Garrison, Nancy Kilgore. They're staunch supporters here, and you can do it too. All you have to do is drop by peterbcollins.com, find the menu button, click on Become a Subscriber, and you'll land on the sign-up page where you can make a choice. $5, $10, $20 a month, the $50 annual subscription. And I know a lot of people are allergic to PayPal. You can address your correspondence to me at my P.O. Box, number 150-660, San Rafael, California, 94915. I was very surprised to get this news today that Lenin Moreno, the corrupt leader of Ecuador who signed off on the transfer of Julian Assange into the clutches of U.S. authorities, well, Lenin Moreno has blinked. And after 2 weeks of protests over his embrace of the International Monetary Fund's austerity program that included a huge increase in fuel costs, well, the indigenous leaders who led the protest, who occupied the assembly, they've won. Moreno said, "Comrades, this deal is a compromise on both sides. The indigenous mobilization will end, and Decree 883 will be lifted." Now, I am very pleased to see this. We need more popular uprisings and leaders who listen. How about trying a little of that here in the good old U.S. of A.? I'm sorry to report that Spain has convicted 9 prominent separatist leaders from Catalonia. That's the area around Barcelona. I've visited several times. I love the area. And the people are different. They're not Castilian Spanish. They don't relate to Madrid. In fact, my friends from Madrid will tell you with deep contempt that Barcelona is not a part of Spain. Now, so far, the leader of the independence movement, former Catalan President Carles Puigdemont, is still in self-imposed exile in Belgium, but 9 of his colleagues will spend up to 13 years in prison, and they're also blocked from running for public office during that time. Well, the Washington Post does a few things right, and one is they have people who keep track of Trump's prevarication, his lies, his dissembling, his falsehoods. And Wednesday will mark 1,000 days in office for the Trump problem, and the count is standing now at 13,435 deceptions. And number 436 is Trump's claims from Friday that he has a deal with China on trade issues. He did cancel the next round of tariffs. But I believe that his phase 1 is just saving face 1, and that China has probably gotten the better of him. Sure, it'll, make some agreements to purchase American commodities. But in the end, I believe Trump will lose, while, of course, claiming a brilliant, nearly perfect victory. The Donald has lost his 4th Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security. Kevin McAleenan was never even confirmed to the position. He served there for about 6 months, and he bailed on Friday. We're told that Ken Cuccinelli, who is a real knuckle-dragging, dark-minded individual, is likely the next acting director, but there are concerns that he couldn't be confirmed even by the Republican-controlled Senate. So we shall see. And McAleenan quit on the same day that judges in 4 states, these are federal judges, barred the Trump administration from denying benefits or denying green cards to people who immigrate to this country and use some benefits like welfare or housing subsidies. He faced another legal setback in El Paso, where a judge ruled that he acted unlawfully in announcing the stealing of Pentagon funds to build that wall. And in one of the cases, which was decided here in San Francisco, the judge who said that he could not deny benefits to people or deny them a green card if they've received benefits, that this is a move that is repugnant to the American dream. So Trump will continue to pander to his base, to demonize and to harass and injure people who wish to immigrate to this country. And he does it all for political purposes. You know he doesn't want a resolution to our immigration problems. He gets more benefit from exploiting them. Now, here is a very clever move, and I want to credit the team Warren. They bought ads on Facebook that started running last Thursday. And they feature Senator Warren on camera announcing breaking news. And then a voiceover goes on to say that Facebook and Zuckerberg, its owner, are backing the re-election of Trump. Now, neither Zuckerberg nor the firm has announced their support of a candidate. Then Warren comes on camera and says, "You're probably shocked, and you might be thinking, how could this possibly be true?" Well, it's not, she says. We decided to see if Facebook will remove an obviously inaccurate or false advertisement. And there's only one person who wins this battle, and that's Elizabeth Warren. Nice going. The New York Times makes an interesting point. That Senator Warren is certainly growing in the polls. Some she beats Joe Biden, others she's very close within the margin of error, and she has been courting fellow members of Congress. She held a dinner for a dozen members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus near the Capitol recently, and she said, "I need your help." But it's been a month since that meeting, and she has drawn no new endorsements. She only has 3 members of Congress who aren't from Massachusetts who have endorsed her. I find that pretty puzzling. I think she's an attractive candidate to a lot of the establishment people who are afraid of Bernie Sanders. Well, it'll be an interesting debate in Ohio tomorrow evening. And as I discussed recently with Stephen Kinzer in my in-depth interview last week, the way these debates have been run, the topics selected, the way the moderators drill in on stupid stuff, it's got to change. And in the San Francisco Chronicle today, local activists on housing and homelessness are raising their voices and contacting CNN saying, "Hey, do you think you can get off this neener stuff and talk about things that really matter?" We shall see. Now to today's impeachment file. Is Trump getting ready to jettison Rudy Giuliani? On Friday, he was asked if Giuliani is still his personal lawyer. "Well, I don't know," he said. "I haven't spoken to Rudy," and then immediately contradicted himself. "I spoke to him yesterday. He's a very good attorney, and he has been my attorney." Then he tweeted some correctives over the weekend, defending Rudy. So now they are after the legendary crime buster and greatest mayor in the history of NYC, Rudy Giuliani. He may seem a little rough around the edges sometimes, but he's also a great guy and a wonderful lawyer. Such a one-sided witch hunt going on in the USA. Deep state. Shameful. Today, the White House once again tried to block a former Trump appointee from testifying on Capitol Hill. Her name is Fiona Hill. You don't know much about her. She is a respected foreign policy and national security advisor. She was on the Security Council, but she quit just a few days before the now infamous phone call with the new president of Ukraine, Zelensky. Now, she was ordered not to testify, but once again, the House committee produced a subpoena, and we're told that she is testifying behind closed doors today. Trump is renewing his call to unmask the whistleblower. This is obviously a form of witness intimidation, and it's an effort to make it so hot for the dual whistleblowers we're told are out there that Adam Schiff is now saying that the whistleblower number 1 may not be able to testify because of security concerns. And here's a classic attack line. Brad Parscale is Trump's campaign manager. He's a digital guru. He ran the online campaign, the 82 million on Facebook, that did much more than anything Russia did to impact the 2016 election. Parscale has no political background. He's just an online media guy. Anyway, he called the Democratic-led impeachment inquiry a seditious conspiracy, called for the resignation of House Speaker Pelosi. And Republicans threw up a little sideshow drama at the House committee today where Fiona Hill was appearing. They sent Matt Gaetz of Florida, who is an obsequious Trump ass-kisser, and he demanded to be able to watch the hearing. But he's not a member of any of the committees conducting the deposition, and Adam Schiff had him booted, which then led predictably to Jim Jordan of Ohio, a Republican, accused the Democrats of conducting a secretive impeachment proceeding in the basement of the Capitol. It was just a setup. And finally today, I just sneezed. I'm apologizing. I couldn't stop that. Anyway, Max Blumenthal has a must-read piece published at the Gray Zone Project today because he shows how the Atlantic Council, which has been a big booster of Joe Biden forever, has ties to the Ukraine. They got some funding from Burisma, the company where Hunter Biden served on the board of directors, as much as $250,000 a year. And the Atlantic Council is also funded by all of the big U.S.-based multinational oil firms. And so what we are shown in Max Blumenthal's detailed reporting is that the Atlantic Council, at the time that Hunter Biden went on the Burisma board, was pushing to ramp up the proxy war against pro-Russian forces in Ukraine. In 2015, the think tank helped prepare a proposal for arming the Ukrainian military with offensive weaponry, which is what Trump has done. The Atlantic Council also gets funding from the two manufacturers of that Javelin missile system, Raytheon and Lockheed Martin. When you tie that together with the regime change efforts of the Obama State Department under Victoria Nuland, you have a pretty interesting picture of how influence is peddled both in Ukraine and here in the United States, and how the Atlantic Council is a very influential driver of a lot of the media memes that occur here in the United States. And to his credit, Max Blumenthal singles out Michael Carpenter, who, if you watch Rachel Maddow's show, was recently interviewed in the most gentle way. And Michael Carpenter, who's a former Pentagon specialist and was a key advisor to Biden on the National Security Council, now has a perch as the senior director of the Penn Biden Center for Diplomacy, which is funded by, you guessed it, the Atlantic Council. So it's a very interesting piece that ties a lot of interesting threads together, and I hope you will check it out. Thanks for joining me today for my daily news and comment podcast. You're free to share it with absolutely everyone. You'll find it on YouTube, and I remain Peter B. Collins.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling.